Hello everyone, this is Dr. Vibhu and I welcome you all in Vet Science Crash Course presented by VetGuru. This is the very first lecture of veterinary osteology and here we are going to discuss the structure of the bone, composition of the bone and classification of the bones. Okay, so all these three topics we are going to cover in this lecture. Okay, I will start with the definition of bone. So bone is a hard, dense and living connective tissue. Bones are hard, dense and living connective tissue. Here living word is important. Bones are considered as living structures because they are having their own blood supply, they are having their nerve supply, they are having their cells, they can grow, they can repair themselves. Okay, and all these are the properties of living. That's why bones are considered as living structures. Okay, now if we talk about the structure of the bones, we can classify all the structure of the bone into two main categories, and these two categories are gross structures and microscopic structures. Okay, the structures which are visible with the naked eyes are called as gross structures, while the structures which are visible under the microscope only are called as microscopic structures of bones. Okay, in the gross structures we have membranous covering of the bone, and these coverings are periosteum and endosteum. Periosteum is the outer covering of the bone, endosteum is the inner covering of the bone. It is the membranous covering that is lining the medullary cavity of the bone. Then bones have regions, and these regions are epiphysis. It is the end part of the bone, it is the terminal part of the bone. Then bone have diaphysis. Bones have diaphysis. Diaphysis is actually the shaft part of the bone. It is the cylindrical long part of the bone. Then metaphysis. Metaphysis is the part that is located between epiphysis and diaphysis. Clear? Then bones have medullary cavity, and this medullary cavity is containing bone marrow. Okay, this medullary cavity is containing bone marrow. So these are the gross structures of the bones. Then we have microscopic structures like bone cells, and these cells are osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblast, osteocytes and osteoclast. So these are bone cells. Okay, then bones have bone matrix, and on the basis of arrangement of these bone matrix we have two types of bone tissues: compact bone tissues or cortical bone tissues, and second is spongy bone tissue or the cancellous or the trabecular bone tissue. Okay, so all these structures we are going to discuss in detail in this lecture. So first we have periosteum, and it is a dense connective tissue membrane that is covering the outer surface of the bone. So periosteum is a tissue membrane that is made up of dense connective tissue, and this layer is covering the outer surface of the bone. Suppose this is a bone. Okay, this is a bone, and this outer covering, this outer membranous covering that is made up of dense connective tissue is called as periosteum. So this is the periosteum that is lining the outer surface of the bone. Okay, this periosteum is actually made up of two layers, and these two layers are outer fibrous layer and inner cellular layer. Outer fibrous layer is made up of collagen fibers and fibroblast. So this layer is made up of collagen fibers and fibroblast. That's why this is known as fibrous layer. And the function of this layer is to provide protection to the bone, and this will also act as the attachment site for tendons and ligaments. Okay, so this is outer fibrous layer. Then we have inner cellular layer. It is also called as osteogenic layer because this layer has a potential to produce the bone tissue. This layer is responsible for the formation of bone tissue. That's why this layer is also called as osteogenic layer. There are different cells, there are different bone cells will be present in this inner cellular layer, and these cells are osteoprogenitor cells and osteoblast cells. Actually these cells are responsible for the bone tissue formation. Actually these cells are behind the osteogenic potential of this inner cellular layer. Okay, the role of this layer is in bone growth, especially in width, and this layer is also responsible for the fracture healing. So if question asks that which layer of the periosteum is responsible for the fracture healing, the answer is inner cellular layer. Which layer of the periosteum is responsible for the bone growth? The answer is inner cellular or the osteogenic layer. Which layer of the periosteum is responsible for the attachment site? Which layer act as attachment site for the attachment of tendons or ligaments? The answer is outer fibrous layer of periosteum. Clear? This periosteum is absent in sesamoid bones. Sesamoid bones are actually small rounded bones that are developed within the tendons. Okay, these bones are developed within the tendons, and this periosteum will be absent in these bones. Okay, this periosteum layer is also absent at the articular surfaces that are covered by the cartilage. The surface of the bone that is involved in the joint formation. The surfaces of the bone that is covered by the cartilage, this periosteum will be absent there. This will be also absent at the sites of tendon and ligament attachment. So the site of the bone from where tendons or ligaments are attached, this periosteum layer will be absent at that site. Then we have endosteum, and this endosteum is actually a thin connective tissue membrane that is lining the medullary cavity of the bone, that is lining the central canals, and it also lines the trabeculae. Okay, so this is the lining that is lining the inner structure of the bone. This is the connective tissue membrane that is lining the medullary cavity of the bone, that is lining the central canals of the bone, that is lining the trabeculae of the bone. Okay, suppose this is the bone, this is a bone, and this is the medullary cavity of the bone. Suppose this is the medullary cavity of the bone. So the layer, the thin connective tissue layer that is lining this medullary cavity. Okay. Suppose this is the lining. This is called as endosteum. Endosteum. Okay. This endosteum is containing different bone cells, and these cells are osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblast, and osteoclast. Okay. So these cells will be present in endosteum. If we talk about the functions of this endosteum, so this will help in the bone remodeling. Okay, remodeling is actually a continuous process in which old bone tissue will be degraded by the osteoclast cells, and new bone tissue will be formed by the osteoblast cells. So this endosteum is responsible for the bone remodeling, and this is due to the presence of osteoblast and osteoclast cells. Okay, this layer will also help in the bone growth, especially in the diameter, and this will also play a role in nutrition. This endosteum is actually present in the close proximity of the blood cells. This is located nearest to the blood supply. Okay, this is located nearest to the blood vessels. So this layer will provide the nutrition to the blood cells. Sorry, to the bone cells, and or you can say this layer is responsible for the nutrition of the bone. Okay, so this is about periosteum and endosteum. After discussing the coverings of the bones, let's discuss the regions of the bones. So bones have mainly three regions: epiphysis, metaphysis, and diaphysis. Okay, so what is epiphysis? It is actually the terminal or the end part of a long bone. Okay, so if we talk about the long bones, the terminal or the end parts of these bones are called as epiphysis, or you can say either extremities of a long bone is called as epiphysis. Okay, this is the picture of a long bone, and this is the end part of the bone. This is another end or the terminal part of the bone. Okay, so these end or the terminal parts are called as epiphysis. These are epiphysis. Clear? These epiphyses are covered with articular or hyaline cartilage at joints. Okay, so these terminal parts of the bone, these terminal ends of the bone are going to attach with the part of another bone, and these parts are going to form a joint. Okay, so these epiphyses are covered with articular or hyaline cartilage. This is important. Okay, This epiphysis is actually composed of spongy or cancellous bone tissues with red bone marrow. Okay, I told you that on the basis of matrix arrangement, whether it is loosely arranged, whether it is compactly arranged, we have two types of bone tissues: spongy or the cancellous bone tissues and compact bone tissues. Clear? So this epiphysis is actually made up of spongy or cancellous bone tissues. Here you can see matrix are loosely arranged. So this is the spongy bone tissues. Okay. So this epiphysis part of the bone is composed of spongy or the cancellous bone tissues with red bone marrow. Here you can see. Here you can see these are red bone marrow. Okay. So red bone marrow is present in epiphysis of the bone. Then we have diaphysis, and it is actually the shaft or the central tubular part of a long bone. Okay, so this is the shaft of the bone. This is the shaft. This is the diaphysis of the bone. Okay, this is the diaphysis of the bone. Clear? This is the tubular part of the bone, tubular long part of the bone. This is composed of compact bone. Okay, epiphysis is composed of spongy bony tissues, and this diaphysis is composed of thick compact bone tissues. Okay, this diaphysis is containing medullary cavity which is filled with yellow bone marrow. Okay, so this diaphysis will contain a cavity. This is the cavity, and this is called as medullary cavity. This is called as medullary cavity or marrow cavity, and in this marrow cavity there will be yellow bone marrow. Okay, this is the yellow bone marrow. Red bone marrow was present where? In the epiphysis, while yellow bone marrow is present where? In the diaphysis, in the medullary cavity. And this yellow bone marrow is actually the storage site for the fat in adults. Okay, so this is for the fat storage. This diaphysis is actually the cylindrical part of the bone. This is actually the this is actually the strongest part of the bone. So this will provide a strength and weight bearing capacity to the bones. Okay, so this is the function of diaphysis. Next we have metaphysis, and it is actually the part between diaphysis and epiphysis. So this is present between the diaphysis. This is the diaphysis. Suppose this is the diaphysis and this is the epiphysis. So this part, okay, this middle part is called as metaphysis. This is the metaphysis. Clear? This metaphysis is containing epiphyseal or growth plate in growing bones. Okay, so in the growing bones, the growth plate is present in this metaphysis, and this is actually the site of bone lengthening. This will help the bone to grow in the length. Okay, so this metaphysis is containing growth plate which will help in the bone lengthening. This metaphysis is actually highly vascular structure. Okay, this is rich in vascular supply. This is rich in blood supply. So this is the common site for hematogenous osteomyelitis. Osteomyelitis is actually the infection. It is actually the inflammation of bone and bone marrow, and this the infection that is spreading through the blood is called as hematogenous spread, and it is called as hematogenous osteomyelitis. The infection that is spreading through the blood is called as hematogenous osteomyelitis, and this region is highly vascular region. This is rich in blood supply. That's why this region is more prone to hematogenous osteomyelitis. Clear? This is important. Which region of bone is more prone to hematogenous osteomyelitis? The answer is metaphysis. Then we have medullary cavity or the marrow cavity. I told you the cavity that is present inside the shaft of the bone. It is the hollow central cavity that is present inside the diaphysis of long bone. Okay, the cavity that is present in the diaphysis is called as medullary or marrow cavity. It is called as marrow cavity because it is containing the yellow bone marrow. This is lined by endosteum. I told you endosteum. Endosteum is the inner lining. It is the thin inner lining, thin connective tissue membrane that is lining the marrow cavity, that is lining the medullary cavity, and this is containing marrow, bone marrow actually. So this medullary cavity, this marrow cavity is for the bone marrow. Okay, the bone marrow will be present in the medullary cavity. This will be present in the marrow cavity. Okay, so what is bone marrow? Bone marrow is actually a soft, pulpy connective tissue. It is a soft, pulpy connective tissue that is filled in medullary cavity, that is filled in cancellous bone spaces and central canals of compact bone. I told you that red bone marrow is present in spongy bones, spongy bone tissue that is present in epiphysis. These bone marrow are present in the medullary cavity also. These are present in the central canals of compact bones also. Okay. We have two types of bone marrow, red bone marrow and yellow bone marrow. This red bone marrow is containing the hematopoietic stem cells. Okay, the hematopoietic stem cells will be present in red bone marrow, and these cells have capacity to produce the blood cells like RBC, WBC and platelets. So due to the presence of hematopoietic stem cells, red bone marrow is active site for the hematopoiesis. Red bone marrow is the active site for the hematopoiesis. This is the active site for the production of blood cells like WBC, RBC and platelets. That's why it is also called as hematopoietic site. This is red bone marrow. This is containing the hematopoietic stem cells. Okay. Then we have yellow bone marrow, and this yellow bone marrow is containing the mesenchymal stem cells. Okay, the hematopoietic stem cells are present in red bone marrow. They have capacity to produce the blood cells. They have capacity to produce RBC, WBC, and platelets. That's why red bone marrow is the active site for the hematopoiesis, while yellow bone marrow is containing mesenchymal stem cells, and these stem cells are going to form fat, cartilage, bones. Okay, so these cells are responsible for the formation of fat, for the formation of cartilage, and for the formation of bone especially. This yellow bone marrow is actually the site for the storage of fat, and this will act as energy reservoir. Okay, this yellow bone marrow can revert to red marrow under severe anemia or blood loss. Okay, when there is heavy blood loss, when there is severe anemia, body will require the production of the huge amount. Body will require in huge amount production of RBC and WBC. So to cope up with blood loss, to cope up with anemia, this yellow bone marrow will convert into red marrow, and these yellow bone marrow, after converting the red bone marrow, will start producing the blood cells. They will start producing the RBC, they will start producing WBC and platelets. Okay, so this yellow bone marrow can easily revert to red marrow under severe and blood loss anemic conditions. Okay, so this is important. The yellow bone marrow can revert to red marrow. This is true. Okay, they can ask you a question that in assertion region or in a statement that yellow bone marrow can convert into red bone marrow under severe anemia or blood loss. This is the correct statement. Okay, they will convert into bone marrow, red bone marrow, and they will start producing the blood cells. Okay, so by this way our body can cope up the blood loss, our body can cope up with severe anemia. Let's move on to bone cells. So bones have mainly four types of cells. These are osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblast, osteoclast, and osteocytes. Okay, so first we are going to discuss osteoprogenitor cells. These are actually undifferentiated stem cells. These are undifferentiated. This is important point. These are undifferentiated cells that can easily divide. Okay, they are located in inner periosteum and endosteum. They are located in the inner layer of periosteum. That layer is also called as cellular layer or osteogenic layer. So they are present in inner periosteum as well as in endosteum. Their function is to divide and differentiate into osteoblast. So they are undifferentiated. That's why they can easily divide and they will differentiate into osteoblast. Now we have osteoblast. and these are actually the main bone forming cells. Okay, these are the main cell responsible for the bone formation. They are forming the bones by secreting the collagen and inorganic matrix. Okay, so they will secrete the collagen and inorganic matrix. There will be no division in osteoblast like osteoprogenitor cells. They will only differentiate into osteocytes. This is important. Okay, so osteoprogenitor cells, OPC, osteoprogenitor cells will differentiate into osteoblast. They will differentiate into osteoblast, and these osteoblasts will differentiate into osteocytes. Osteocytes, and these osteocytes are mature cells. Okay, so osteoprogenitor cells are the only cells of the bone that are undifferentiated, that can divide. Other cells of the bones can't divide. Okay, osteoblast will differentiate into osteocytes. So finally osteoprogenitor cells will give rise to the osteoblast, and these osteoblasts will differentiate into osteocytes. This flow chart is important. Okay, osteoblasts are arising from osteoprogenitor cells, osteocytes are arising from osteoblasts. Then we have osteocytes, and these are derived from osteoblast. These are mature cells. This is important. The only mature cell of the bone is osteocyte. Okay. So if in the examiner asks that which of the following bone cells are mature, the answer is osteocyte. Okay. These osteocytes are responsible for the maintenance of bony tissues. Okay, so they are the main cells that maintain the bone tissues. There will be no division because they are the mature cells. They do not need to divide. They will not divide in any condition because they are the mature cells of the bone. Then we have another cells, and these are osteoclasts. These are actually bone resorbing cells. Resorbing means they will break down the old bone tissues, and they will dissolve that broken tissues. Okay, these are actually large multinucleated, and they are formed by the fusion of monocytes. These are large multinucleated cells that are formed by the fusion of monocytes in the bones. Okay, there will be no division like osteoprogenitor cells. There will be no division. Their function is bone resorption. Okay, they will break down the old bone tissues, they will dissolve the old bone tissues. Okay, so this is about bone cells. On the basis of matrix arrangement, we have two types of bone tissues, and these are compact or cortical bone tissue and spongy or cancellous bone tissues. Okay, so first we have compact or cortical bone tissue. This is actually hard dense external layer of bones. Okay, so this is the external hard dense layer of bone, and this is called as compact bone tissue. This is compact bone tissue. Okay, this cortical bone tissue, this compact bone tissue will form the shaft of long bones. This will form the shaft of long bones. Okay, so this is the shaft of long bones, and this is composed of cortical bone or cortical bone. Okay, this compact or cortical bone tissue is organized into Haversian system. This is organized into Haversian system, and this is also called as Osteon. Okay, this is very important. The compact or cortical bone tissue is organized into Haversian system, that is also called as Osteon, and this Haversian system is consisting of Haversian canal, lamellae, lacunae, and canaliculi. Okay, so this Haversian canal is the central canal with blood vessel and nerves along with lymphatics. Okay, so in this picture you can see this is the bone, and this is the epiphysis of the bone. This is composed of mainly spongy bones. Okay, these are porous bone tissue. Then we have shaft of this bone, and this shaft is composed of compact or cortical bone tissues. Okay, so this is compact or cortical bone tissue, and this is organized into Haversian system. This is organized into osteons. Okay, so these are osteons. These are osteons. Okay, these are osteons. These are osteons. Okay. So these osteons are Haversian system is consist of are consisting of Haversian canal, lamellae, lacunae, and canaliculi. So what is Haversian canal? It is actually the central canal with blood vessel, nerves, and lymphatics. Okay. So this central canal is called as Haversian canal. Okay, here you can also see this is the Haversian canal. This is the Haversian canal. Okay, this central canal is called as Haversian canal. This Haversian canal is communicating with marrow. This is communicating with marrow cavity. This is communicating with bone marrow via Waxman canal. Here you can see this is the Waxman canal. Okay, so this is the Waxman canal via which Haversian canal is communicating with marrow. It is communicating with marrow cavity. Then we have lamellae, and these are concentric bony layers around Haversian canal. Okay, so this is Haversian canal, and around this canal these are concentric layers. These are concentric layers. These layers are lamellae. These are lamellae. Okay. Then we have lacunae. Lacunae are the spaces between lamellae, and these spaces are housing the osteocytes. Okay, so these are lamellae, these are concentric layers, and the space between these layers, this space is called as lacunae. This space is lacunae, and osteocytes will be present here. Okay, these are osteocytes. These are osteocytes, and these osteocytes will be present in the lacunae. This is important. Osteocytes are present in lacunae part of osteon, lacunae part of Haversian system. Then we have canaliculi, and these are actually fine radiating canals from lacunae, and these are for the exchange of nutrient and waste materials. Okay, so canaliculi are actually the radiating canals from the lacunae, and these are for the nutrient and waste exchange. Clear? After compact bone tissue, we have spongy or the cancellous bone tissues. Okay, this spongy or cancellous bone tissue is actually light porous bone tissue, and this bone tissue is located in the inner layer of all bones. Okay, this spongy or cancellous bone tissue will form the inner layer of all bones except shaft part of the bones. Okay, so suppose this is the long bone. This is a long bone, and the inner part of this long bone, this inner part. Okay, this inner part, except the inner part of shaft, this inner part is made up of light porous tissue. Light porous tissue, this is called as a spongy or cancellous tissue. So this is the spongy, or cancellous tissue. Okay, this spongy or cancellous bone tissue, if we talk about the structure of this spongy bone tissue, this tissue is made up of trabeculae, and these trabeculae are actually the thin plates of bone. Okay, these are made up of trabeculae. There will be no osteon, there will be no Haversian system. Very important point. Okay, there will be no osteon, there will be no Haversian system in spongy or cancellous bone. Haversian system will be present in compact bone only. Okay, so this is about bone tissues.